What up, what up, what up? Welcome to another episode of New Orleans Basketball. I'm your host, Raphael Rattler, joined by my fellow middle brother, Garrett Jr. Rattler. What's popping with you, bro? Welcome to the summer. Welcome to spicy season.
Very, very spicy season. What up, bro? Man, everything's all good on this side, man. It's been a minute since we've been on a lot of things. Of course, the NBA is always got something going on with them, right? And now we passed the draft lottery. Pels got to man. Let me tell you. Let me tell you something, Rap. Let me tell you something. The NBA will never ever see the pearly gates for making the NBA draft lottery happen during brunch and on Mother's Day.
Yeah.
Shout out to all the moms. I miss my mom. Rest in peace. Shout out to your moms and Lindsay and everybody who I was with in Dallas. But shout out to the moms who sat around and watched all the men at the tables and all the brunches who, like us, who were sitting there watching the draft lottery, and especially the New Orleans moms, because I know every Pelicans fan was watching that draft lottery, and the Pels give up pick 8. Which is not the worst outcome, but we'll get into that. And then obviously the Pels hired a new coach, so we'll get into that as well. Shout out to everybody in the city who enjoyed yesterday. They had Keith Lee's first family festival in New Orleans. Apparently went off great. It was great vibes, great atmosphere, great time for the kids in the city as well as the families and everything. So shout out to Keith Lee and shout out to the city for that. But yeah, man, the Jamahl Mosley era is here, and I'm ready to get into it. How's everything on your side, bro?
Everything's blessed. My son made another moon around the sun.
Happy birthday, man. Yes, Lord.
Shout out to him for that. But yeah, I mean, WNBA is kicked off. Mm-hmm. We're getting to that point. Like I texted you yesterday, I was like, or I texted you the day before, I said, there's no NBA games on. There's no WNBA
on a Saturday.
There's no football games on. What do we do? We're almost there. So, enjoy it as much as you can. These next couple of weeks, I think these conference finals and these NBA finals are going to be crazy. And we'll talk about that another day. But you're absolutely right. The Pelicans made some news outside of Trey Murphy sitting courtside with Tyrese Halliburton and everybody tweeting the picture. Oh, no, what's going on with Trey Murphy? Blah, blah. Outside of that, the Pelicans hire head coach. Drake drops 3 albums, and the world is on fire. So before we get into it, because we got a lot to talk about, make sure you guys are following us on Twitter, on IG, on X. That's NO Basketball, no E. Make sure you're liking the episode below. Make sure you're leaving the comments. Obviously, this summer is going to be a long one. It's going to be a lot of big decisions made for the Pelicans. So we want to hear what you guys have thoughts on and what you agree with and what you don't. So let's just jump into it. Joe Dumars makes his first hire, Troy Weaver, right as he a little bit past this time last year. That was his first big hire. And all so far this season goes through, and for the most part, everything's untouched. Season in, and everything changes. This is the most pivotal hire outside of Troy Weaver that he has made in his Pelicans debut. So after a long waiting, the Pelicans have not had a true head coach since middle of the season. Not even before the middle of the season. The Pelicans have hired Jamahl Mosley, who was released from his duties with Orlando following their first round Game 7 loss to the Pistons, who also just lost. So let's just leave it there. Jamahl Mosley is the name that everyone's been looking at. It's the name that the Pelicans have been most associated to for most amount of time, even though he coached for another team for most of for the entire season. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, man. Listen, that Jamahl Mosley is the guy that the Pelicans have had circled for a while. He's been a favorite of a lot of people in the front office for a while. So listen, I'll just get out in front of it. Not too long ago, I said that, Jamahl Mosley was not a coach that I was interested in the Pelicans personally seeing, replace James Borrego as the interim head coach into full head coach. And part of it was because of some of the things that, you had heard about the locker room in Orlando prior to their playoff series. And part of it was, he had a familiarity to him as far as like the coaching style, the way he presents himself. And I've seen people call it Willie Green 2.0. It's not so much as Willie Green 2.0, whereas that he has some similar characteristics towards him. He's not the same exact coach. But I'll my first reaction is that the players better get ready to be held accountable. I mean, this guy who doesn't play, and you can kind of see some of it play out in very ugly ways in the media between him and Paolo this past season. But when you talk about the accountability and needing a voice to kind of come in and step in and kind of hold these guys' feet to the fire, you're not going to get a lot of better answers in the NBA amongst like coaches and players, outside of Jamahl Mosley, and guys love him. Luka Doncic love them. Superstars have spoken well about his his tenure as coaching or his time with star players. But at the same time, there are questions going to be coming into this his tenure about his offensive philosophies. Obviously, the defense is there. We'll get into it. But my first reaction is that I would have preferred the Pelicans if you're gonna step into a new era with Jeremiah Fears and Derik Queen, and obviously you still have Zion and Trey there. You would have liked to seen them give an opportunity to maybe a new coach with a fresh face and not as much history that can be pulled upon. But at the same time, if you see this as an opportunity, we always say here on this podcast, only a Sith deals in absolutes. If this is a team that the front office believes that, and they've been saying it over and over again, as much as people don't want to believe them, that they believe that this roster can compete now, that they just need to, mess with a little bit here, mess with a little bit there, and maybe have a new voice and coaching in there. Then Jamahl Mosley is a fine coach to come in and do that. You saw what he did with Orlando. But at the same time, he has had his struggles. And so it'll be interesting to see where he takes this, again, very unique situation, very unique roster. And what he does with it. It's going to be interesting for me to see a defense-first coach like that get as much as he could get out of guys like Jeremiah Fears and Derik Queen and Zion and Trey, who have not had, the best track record as defenders, and see what he can do with that team. But in all, I think this is a solid hire, and I think it's a safe hire as far as where the floor can be for this team. But as far as the ceiling goes, I'll be interested to see how Jamahl Mosley can push that. How about what's your first reaction of it?
A lot to unpack. So let's start with obviously his time in Orlando, and let's start with how he was hired in the first place. Obviously, Joe Dumars has been in the league office. They've had relationships. You've seen this name connected to the Pelicans for quite some time, and it makes a lot of sense, right? To your point, you are going from a team that we've always talked about. Anytime the Pelicans were matched up against the Magic, man, this is a team that's also wing driven. Man, this is also a team whose main superstar just wants to run through your throat. Like, man, this is a team that could be built very similar to the Pelicans, right? In a lot of ways. And so right off the bat, you can see how it makes sense. But to your point, a lot of the difficulties in Orlando and a lot of the things that didn't go well in Orlando also have been the same things that have plagued the Pelicans as well. And so you look at that and you say, man, why would you go make the same mistake with a similar type roster in terms of the best players and things like that? But let's take a step back on top of that. So, like, I like to see anytime you're doing a coach, no coach is going to be perfect right away. I understand the name that was dazzled around. We talked about it on this podcast is Rajon Rondo. And everyone say, well, why wouldn't you get a fresh voice? To your point, you've already seen what this guy can do. Why don't you see what a fresh face can do? Well, Joe Dumars also has a history of hiring first-time head coaches that didn't go well, right? And so it's not that I don't think he truly gave Rondo a chance, but I think that in the situation that the Pelicans are in right now, where we've talked about so many times before, they're in an interesting situation where you have two young guys going into their second year trying to take that next step. But you also have some guys that are entering their prime and can really help you compete in a lot of ways. That's why they're in trade rumors all the time for every single player on the roster. And so you kind of need a floor. To your point, the Pelicans' floor has been drafting in the top 5 or top 8, in the last couple of years. That's being the floor. It's almost impossible to jump steps and go from the floor of being bottom 5 to being like the Pistons number 1 in the – you kind of have to go through steps. And if you want to say it's a safe hire because it's a similar situation, it's in terms of just the styles of players and things like that, and you're taking an offensive roster and saying we need a defensive coach to fix it, I get it from it. So there's a couple things. I'll start with some of the things I like about the hire and I like about his tenure. Some things that stood out to me that were different from Jamahl Mosley than maybe Willie Green or James Borrego or some of the names you've seen so far in the past is he really, even though him and Paolo kind of hashed it out in the media in different ways, he really saw the growth and development in Paolo Banchero's game. Like you could see each year Paolo getting better, and he empowered to give your best player the ball and let people play off it. Now, that can't be your only offense, and that can't be what you do every single time, but you could see him double down on that. And like if you look at Paolo's game and you look at Zion's game, yeah, Paolo's probably a more diverse scorer, but Zion's a much more efficient scorer, but they both like to score in the same areas of the court. And so if you're going to get a coach who's coming from one superstar that's similar, why not bring the guy who's coming from almost the exact identical type build from Duke University, number one? All of those things fall into play as well. And so I get that. And so I like the fact that he really dove into giving his best players the ball and kind of circulating and building offense off that. That's a floor. To me, we just watched the Pelicans in the highest, levels of Zion's availability and all that stuff, and everyone was healthy for the most part. And like still watching it, even though they were competitive in games, you kept feeling like something's missing. Like the ceiling is missing every night. They're never going to get there because like there's no like rhyme or rhythm to what they're doing. It's just like, hey, we're just going to pass the ball around and see if someone's hot tonight. And I just don't know if that's the best way of going about things. The other thing that kind of stands out to me that I liked about Jamahl Mosley is that they had an identity. How many times did Joe Dumars come in front of the media multiple times before Willie Green was fired, once James Borrego was hired, and say, what are we looking for? We're looking for someone who can make us compete every night and build an identity. Well, the Magic, when they first started with Jamahl Mosley, were not a good defensive team. And over a 2 to 3 to 4 year, 5 year span, they became one. And so I'm looking at a Pelicans team to, again, yes, you don't have the Jonathan Isaac, like random body type that can go all on the court, but is never on the court. Stuff like you don't have some of those athletes that you do in Orlando. But I would argue there's another level to Jeremiah Fears' defense. You and I have argued for a long time. There's another level to Zion's defense that I think he needs to get to. I think Trey Murphy has the athleticism to be sustainable on the defensive end. Just not bad. Not a great performer, but sustainable. Like similar to Desmond Bane, right? Like Desmond Bane is not the biggest guy. Trey Murphy is 6'9" and can jump out the gym. There's no reason he shouldn't be better. And I think a lot of that is the mentality brought with how you coach and what you demand on a given night. And so I look at that piece and say he built an identity of defense. Joe Dumars comes from the Bad Boys Pistons that he both played on and he both was an executive for that are known for their defense. He says Saddiq Bey is the perfect player that we would like to embody and have other guys around that are tough for their defense. And so it's not a shocker to me that they went with a defensive-minded coach to help get these guys on par. What are some of the things that kind of stand out to you from Jamahl Mosley tenure that you liked? And then we'll get to the other stuff.
Yeah. No, I agree with everything you said. I think, having that identity, that defensive forward identity, like that's what I mean about it being safe. Like, what Jamahl Mosley is coming in and is going to preach, and what he's going to try to instill will be this team will defend every night, which is very similar to what Joe Dumars said. The exact in his opening presser when he first got to New Orleans was that you're going to come into New Orleans and this team is going to play hard and this team is going to defend. I will say that the Pelicans last season, they played very hard. They did not defend. They did not defend. And so having a guy, if this team has already kind of self-matured into, okay, we are going to play hard. Okay, so you had that instilled from James Borrego, from Willie Green, that the team is going to play hard, whoever. Now you need the defending piece. I think Jamahl Mosley can step in and do that well. Another thing that I think Jamahl Mosley does well, and it kind of goes apart to what you talked about, is the development of younger players. But I think part of that is his relationships to guys and his relationships with his staff. I think that is going to be the next thing that the Pelicans, Joe Dumars, is going to have to step in and do, because we saw the development of Paolo. Like, to talk about those stars, but there are guys like Anthony Black who had a hell of a development this year, and it's credited to Jamahl Mosley. But it's because Jamahl Mosley was able to go get a guy like Sham God from Dallas and bring him to Orlando, who Anthony Black has stepped in and said, hey, this guy has really come in and kind of helped my development. I think that is one of the things that Jamahl Mosley is great with too, is relationships, whether it's good players, whether it's the guys across the the NBA landscape. I think that is a positive to have, especially if Joe Dumars is going to allow him to build his staff or have some kind of impact on his staff. I think he brings a level of credibility to that position as far as the offense. I mean, as far as like assistants go and things like that. And what I mentioned the first thing, what I talked about earlier, like, he is going to hold people accountable. Like, that is not going to be a question of if this guy is going to do that. Now, he also pours into the kind of a level of the bucket that Zion was talking about having a guy who has done it before. Jamahl Mosley never played in the NBA, but he had a career in Colorado, and he had an overseas career, and he's been around the game long enough to where people respect him and respect his mind and things like that. I think giving him a 5-year deal is interesting, because if it works out where he plays, because we all know coaching deals, you could get the biggest coaching deal in history in 1 year, and then the next season get fired. We saw that with Monty. If he does play this 5-year contract out, you're saying that this guy is in charge of the development of Jeremiah Fears, the development of Derik Queen, and whoever the other team, other young player that you have. And so, if you're speaking that kind of power into his developmental skills, because his team, again, is still very young and has gotten younger when you talk about Jeremiah Fears, Derik Queen, Michael Peavy, those guys. And so I think having that kind of player development track, I think that works out well, for the team right now, who is trying to teeter between the lines of having, guys who are ready to contribute now, as well as having young guys in the wing who have proven that they can play at this level in certain aspects. I just think, and again, here's my turning point, and we can get into this. I think what I just talked about his staffing is going to be incredibly, incredibly important. And this is going into some of the issues that you can see moving forward into this team, because his offense just was not good. It just was not good. It has not been good. Now, to his, to give him some credit, or to be fair to him, he hadn't had a lot of guys who could do some of the things that the Pelicans players can do offensively, right? There hasn't been really a Jeremiah Fears type of spark offense, right? He hasn't had like a distinguished point guard in Dejounte Murray, that kind of point guard there. He's had Jalen Suggs, he's had guys like that, but it's not the distinguished kind of point guard the way Dejounte Murray has shown capabilities to be. He hasn't had a guy like Trey Murphy up until, they got Desmond Bane, talking about a bomber, that type of guy. Hasn't had that type of guy. Oh, he's got Trey Murphy, and really he's got Saddiq Bey now in that as well. Paolo, obviously, he has a similar thing in Zion, which you talked about. And then Franz also was really good as a second in command, but in a very different way that was similar to what Paolo did, which would get in the way, which makes you think about the Zion and Derik Queen kind of fit a little bit. But, again, staffing, we'll see. But your record is your record, and your offense is your offense, your defense is your defense. The defense has been great. We've seen this team go through stretches where the offense just, with all of the you would think talent available on the floor as far as offensive side, when you talk about Zion and Trey, Derik Queen and Jeremiah Fears, and you just go down the list of guys who've been able to score, like they just haven't been able. There've been stretches of times and games and months where they just haven't been able to unlock the offense in ways that they need to. Now, you saw a lot of the offense take a step forward with James Borrego, but that's because that's the kind of coaching that he is. And so Jamahl Mosley is not that coach. And so if you come across a situation where this team, where Jamahl Mosley is trying to preach this defensive intensity and this defensive standard that he's holding, and you don't get that kind of results from the players, but you also don't have the offense to back it up or to manufacture it, which you saw with James Borrego last season. That is what concerns me, is at that point, what happens at that point. And so again, there is positives to be seen. You talked about the defensive identity, but also putting the ball in your best player's hands. And again, he's come from a situation where he's dealt with wing players who aren't the greatest shooters and still found success. It is in the Eastern Conference, and you cannot, you have to speak that has to be a part of the context. But he did find success out of that. And so hopefully he's taken what he's learned and got back, and has kind of grown from it. 2 weeks away from the job is not a long time to kind of sit back and think about some of the things. So this shows that the Pelicans were really wanted Jamahl Mosley. But I do worry about what happens if the defense can't get to where he wants it to be, which is what we saw a little bit in Orlando. They had a slippage. They went from 2 to 3 to 10, 11-ish. And that offense never was able to keep it afloat because, through schematics and things. What happens if that happens with the Pelicans is the one thing that I worry about with Jamahl Mosley.
Well, I think those are all really good points. I think the one that stands out to me for sure is there's two ways of looking at this. You obviously are coming from a situation where, things didn't work out, had a really weird year after the organization went all in to go get Desmond Bane, and that was going to be your team, and you were supposed to be the Pistons of this season. That was supposed to be your trajectory. People were hurt. Now he has a lot of experience with players being injured, so that is a plus walking into the New Orleans building. But you have a year where all the chips are stacked and you don't quite get the results. Then people are like, well, they're just a dead team walking. And then you go blow people out in the play-in. And then you go to the playoffs and you are one Franz Wagner injury away from probably upsetting the 1 seed. So you win 3 years. I'm not going to discredit the things that he was able to do. Yes, there are some things that were blatant. And every time the Magic lost, it was obvious why they were losing. To your point, like the offense was just like hard to watch. And I think for a casual fan, the worst thing you can put in front of them is bad offense. Bad defense, okay, as long as you can score 150. I just watched Charlotte have a whole season of not playing no defense, but people are like, the Charlotte Hornets have arrived. Then they get to the play and get smacked because they can't play defense, right? But people like that, right? But in the reverse, if you're playing good defense, but you can never score, sometimes, especially to the casual fan, that is hard to watch, right? So it's more obvious when that happens. And to your point, you're going from a gig that you just ended, in a disappointing win. I'm switching tables and I'm going right back again. That's not a whole lot of time to learn. But where I kind of lean on that is, one, you should be learning all throughout. Like if you're in any profession and you're excelling at a job or you're taking the next step to the next job, you should always be looking for ways you can be better. I'm sure Jamahl Mosley was not walking around like, yeah, everything is hunky-dory on the offensive end. There's no ways we can give. I'm sure he recognizes the own flaws in his own system, his own tendencies, his own production so far. And so I'm sure Joe Dumars sees that as well. And so to your point around the assistants and what do you put around you, like I'm going to go to a football analogy. Sean Payton was scoring a ton of points, but until they were able to put defensive coordinators on the other side of him to be able to match his style of offense, the Saints weren't very good, right? They would just score a bunch of – I think it's very similar in basketball. If you're a defensive-minded coach, phenomenal. Do you get an offensive-minded guys to come in and institute their offense for you if that's not a strength of yours? Like, that's part of leadership is knowing where your flaws are and where your weaknesses are. And so I'm interested to see, to your point, how the coaching staff and assistant coaching staff is assembled based off the data and the information that you already know. So I couldn't agree more with that. Now, to your point about the talent and the pieces around them, the Magic were terrible on from the 3-point. Almost they were worse than the Pelicans in some areas. Like it very reminiscent to Oh, throw it into your best player. If they can't score at the rim, pass it out to someone and pray that they make it. Very, very similar in that way. But like, I couldn't agree with you more. And like, this leads me into like some of the reasons why it might work. Like, if I look at the roster from top to bottom, yes, we talked about Zion and Paolo play very similarly. Paolo probably does shoot, is more willing to shoot jumpers and stuff like that, but Zion's more efficient. If you want to put Dejounte and Franz like in the same category because they're both like all-star, French all-star type player, okay. I think Trey Murphy and Desmond Bane are in very similar tiers of players. But then like after that, it's like, okay, I think Saddiq Bey and, Jalen Suggs are probably maybe similar tier, but I think Saddiq Bey is a much better offensive player. Okay, Wendell Carter and Yves Missi, like, I think that Wendell probably has more to his game, but I think that Yves has a higher ceiling just with what he's shown and showed at the end of last season and the fact that he has age and like health on his side, unlike Wendell Carter. But then like after that, I love Anthony Black. Arkansas's finding Woo Pig. I've seen a lot of Anthony Black. Jeremiah Fears on a different planet offensively than Anthony Black. Like they're just very different players, and I would much more lean to that side. Derik Queen, I love Goga Batanzo. Would love to see if Jamahl Mosley can bring him to New Orleans, right? That would be a great addition, things like that. Derik Queen, much higher ceiling offensively. Like, say what you want to say about Jordan Poole on the roster. He is better offensively than Javon Carter, Jamal Cain, Jace Richardson, Jett Howard. Like that's what you're talking about. That's what Orlando was tasked with. And so like you look at that and you say, okay, you give a defensive minded coach going to a team that was adept at defense, right? Like obviously they were frisky and steals and blocks, and I think that's where they're going to have to live. That's where the Magic lived. They used their athleticism to their advantage, but they were frisky on the turnover. I think that's where they're going to have to be more so than I'm OKC and I'm shutting off the water from the get-go. I just think that's where they're going to have to be. So if you take a defensive coach and you mold it on an offensive roster, what can you bring? To your point, like we talked about it before. No offense to the mild-mannered guys, because you need people like this in the and females. You need people like this in the workplace, period, whether NBA coaching or whatever. But like, there's a difference when like you've got a challenger as the captain of your ship. Like someone's that gonna look you in the face and say, "You're not being enough, Zion. You're not doing enough, Derik. You're not doing enough," and like not afraid. Afraid is not the right word, but like it's just not their personality to be combative in that way. I think a part of that is good. I think Paolo, who, again, you've seen the growth and the development from Paolo, but he's always been wired a certain way, even from a younger age. I don't know if the challenger type situation is necessarily what he appreciated, but I damn sure think Zion would be really good having a coach that is willing to call him out when it doesn't work.
Yeah, no, I agree 1,000%. I appreciate everybody coming through today for the stream. So that part is super important to me, and I think layered on top of that challenger mindset, the bringing stuff out of people. I think what Jamahl Mosley and Willie Green don't have in common is that he'll do that. He'll call you out in things, but he'll also give young players an opportunity to step in and play, right? You talked about Jace Richardson and Jett Howard and those guys. Yeah, those guys they haven't gotten on the floor and haven't played, but Jamal Cain was playing like in the playoffs for Orlando and stepping in big shots. And the reason he was able to do that, and guys like Anthony Black were able to step in and do things, Tristan De Silva, guys like that, they all got opportunities to play throughout the regular season, right? I saw Jett Howard on the floor. Maybe he didn't do enough to garner more playing time, but I saw him on the floor. I saw Jace Richardson on the floor getting opportunities to play throughout the regular season. And I think coupling a guy who is a challenger and demands the best out of you and will call you out if not, and coupling that with a guy who will also give you an opportunity to do those things that he's challenging you to do, to implement to you. I think that in of itself is a plus. And I think to what Joker is asking about getting on the floor, able to hit the floor running, because the teams are similar. I think the teams having similar, players who need opportunities to go out there. Jeremiah Fields will be in his second year, and Derik Queen, but they're both like really, really still young. Yves Missi is another one. Carlo Magovich is another one. Like guys who should be coming out and getting opportunities to play, which we've seen in prior seasons. Guys just go missing from the rotation for whatever reason. I don't think that that's going to be a Jamahl Mosley thing. I think he's a guy who's going to give players opportunities to get on the floor and implement some of the things that he's calling you out for, to see if you can be better and be better. And again, they lost they had a bad season. They lost, and they lost in the first round. But he had this team up 3-1 against the number 1 seed and winning playoff games on the road, which is, only a dream the Pelicans can think of right now. And so
just get to the playoffs.
Exactly. And so I think that is pluses in his side for sure. But I think his ability to reach the young players and to give them opportunities to play, I think that could benefit a team of a bunch of young guys who have talent, who just need opportunities to get out there and play, and to have a guy to hold them accountable when they make the same mistakes over and over again, especially a guy who can call them out on the defensive side of the ball.
Right. I mean, again, if you look at the track, even James Borrego, I don't think it's like, obviously everyone has a little fire if you play in sports, period. But I don't think he's like the in-your-face type guy either. So you look at the track record, there wasn't an in-the-face type guy except Stan Van Gundy. Like that's the only one, and Stan only lasted a year because they weren't ready to hear all that. Like I think that in itself, to your point, and what we've talked about this all season, like when you bring in guys like Jeremiah Fears and Derik Queen, and you've got the GM saying, or the president, vice president of basketball saying we need to get tougher, things like that. I think it all starts with your captain. And I think at least having the mentality or my whole is a change that I am willing to see, just to see how it plays out. Because honestly, everybody's driven a little bit different and everyone is wired a little bit different. Some people need you to call them out versus to give them space and stuff like that. And so I'm open to a different approach. I see some stuff in the comments like, who do you want to bring to this step? Now, let me ask you this question. Obviously, everyone was honed in on Rondo. It's a big name. Everybody recognizes that name, period. He doesn't get this job. You haven't really seen his name linked to other coaching candidacies right now. If Rondo's brought into the staff, and maybe some of the other guys you brought in, Darvin Ham, some of the other guys, Steve Hetzel, maybe he's the first assistant, whatever it may be, obviously he might pull some guys from Orlando and stuff like that. Does that make you feel good? Like if you bring in some of those guys, does that kind of satisfy the fact that at least you have all those minds in the same building?
Well, Jamahl Mosley went from Dallas to Orlando, and so did God Shamgod. So if you could get God Shamgod to come to New Orleans and work with Jeremiah Fears, Lord have mercy. I'd sign me up for that 1,000. Call him up right now. Tell him we got beignets waiting for him at the door. Like whatever he wants, if you could get him to come. But yes, I think that was what the part I was talking about earlier about giving a little legitimacy to the head coaching position. It's very similar to what not Stan Van Gundy, but David Griffin did to the GM position or the president of basketball operation position of the Pelicans, right? People were like, oh, that guy is going to that Trajan organization, Lane, right? Trajan Lane. So now you could get other guys to come in who have respectable, respectable, I guess, reputations across the league. I think Jamahl Mosley is of that ilk. I think, he's a fairly young coach, and I think that he has a lot of connections to a lot of guys throughout the coaching tree. So I think, if you could get some of those guys, even some of those, like you talked about, those guys that you interview with, if they, want to move on from their positions. I know Rajon Rondo is on that Buck staff, but Taylor Jenkins is now there. And so you don't know if that's something he would want. And I'm sure if it's either that or go back to college or do something, if he wanted to remain in the NBA, if you offered him a position on the coach. I mean, we just watched James Borrego be there for however long, and then have a chance to step in and do the head coaching position again. I think that would be a good place to start to get some of those guys. But you have to nail. Joker is saying in the comments, you have to nail this staff, because Jamahl Mosley has shown you that he has some things that he can do really, really well. But again, the numbers are the numbers, the data is the data, your record is your record, the stats are the stats. His offenses have not shown to be able to be, high enough on a ranking or efficient enough or whatever the case is to be where you want this team to be, where this team's, payroll, where this team's, the players on this team, where they all point you to where you should be. And so you have to nail this staff and get guys in there who can step into places and step into roles where Jamahl Mosley is not the best at. And I'm sure he, again, like you talked about, I'm sure he knows that his offense was told year after year after year in the bottom 5 or, not getting higher than 19, celebrating finishing in the top 20 because you've been under 20 the past 4 years is not something that you're going to be able to bring to a new job and expect things to change or expect things to be better for you. You're going to have to step in and be malleable, bring in guys who have innovative offensive minds to help you with the offensive side, because I do believe the Pelicans can and should be better defensively than they were this season. I mean, they were ranked 22nd. Of course, there's no way to go but up. But I think they have guys, if you look at this team, between Herb Jones, between Zion, Trey Murphy, Yves Missi, Carlo Makovich, Dejounte Murray, like you have average to plus defenders on this team. And then obviously guys who can be in passing lanes and do other things like Jeremiah Fears and Derik Queen. Like you have the ability, this team should be better defensively. It's the offense that I'm going to be watching. And I think it starts with the staff that you bring in to help lift the where Jamahl Mosley might not be his best at.
Right. I think you nailed it on the head, and we'll wrap this up because we'll come back to you guys after the presser. Is that I think just your floor was raised. Like to your point, there's just too many athletes on the Pelicans roster. For every game, you'd be looking to say, how is that guy wide open at the rim after one pass? There's just too many of those. And the biggest part, again, shout out to Kevin Garnett, Uncut Gems, there would be moments or stretches where you're like, that's what the Pelicans defense should look like. But like the consistency was never there. Even when they had their little run, like right before the All-Star break, after the All-Star break, like even within games, like the defense would like drop off the cliff and then like lock in for 5 minutes, stuff like that.
No, look, and to that point, if you don't understand how like coaching can affect those things, right? You say it's the same players. How could coaching stay? If I'm coaching a player and I tell you, hey, look, when you nail this rotation, that person behind you, you have to trust that person behind you to step up and nail his and help the helper. And if you know that your coach has been drilling in that to your head over and over and practice, instead of you being lost on rotations, okay, when I nail this rotation, the person behind me is supposed to nail that rotation. I'm going to trust that person because coaches told me, and we've gone through this over and over again. Whereas with the last season and seasons before, it would be, well, if I nail this rotation, then I know I need to go out there and run out and put that fire out. And then that
will be there somewhere, yeah.
And then that leaves guys wide open. Whereas if you're coaching and you're coaching to nail rotations and help the helper and make sure that you trust the person behind you, that is how coaching changes defensive schemes and defensive mentalities. And that's how guys who aren't, coming into the league as best defenders. Nobody thought Paolo was a great defender coming out the league. Nobody thought, Franz Wagner was a good defender. Like these guys didn't come into the league as great defenders, but the scheme, the system that Jamahl Mosley and his team and his assistants would put in allow those guys to be, better defenders than they should be.
Well, here's what I'll say. I won't even discredit James Borrego or Willie Green or any other coach and say that they weren't practicing and teaching those same principles. But like we've talked about before, and where I agree with you, I think Jamahl Mosley is different than Willie Green in that they're both player coaches. But I think Jamahl Mosley is more of accountability coach than anything the Pelicans have had in the last 6 years, right? It's since then. He's not to your point of, hey, I'm going to teach you this, but if you mess it up on the court, you are coming to sit on the bench because that's not what we do. And I don't think that the Pelicans have been there so far. I think it's been all right, they got to work through it here versus like, this is what we do. It is defense first. And the moment you mess it up, you got consequences to pay.
Ain't no calling out. Ain't no calling up. This is calling out. Yeah.
Right.
Because calling up is gone. Calling out is it.
That's over, right? And I think you need a little bit of that. I think you need a lot of that, to be honest, in professional sports. But like, I just think that those type of things will lend well. Now, look, if things don't work out, you'll know exactly why it worked out. The offense never got better. You saw exactly what you saw in Orlando, and exactly what you've been seeing in New Orleans past couple years. To your point, the players don't buy in the defense first. These are a bunch of scorers like Jeremiah Fears, Derik Queen, Trey Murphy. These are guys who know how to get him up. And you're coming to Bills and saying, forget all that. This is what we're focused on. I can see that going two type of ways. And so the third part of this is like, the way that this goes awry is if you have a similar situation with Paolo where the star player and the coach are not in lockstep, and so somebody's got to go in that scenario. And if that happens here with the Jeremiah Fears and Derik Queen, and to a lesser extent, Trey Murphy and Zion Williamson and things like that, things go awry. But look, I see it in the comments. Who do you think benefits from this hire? You know, this could be a good situation. I don't think this is the Pelicans were what, 4th worst record in the league last year, whatever it was, gave up the 8th pick. I don't think this is if you fix the coach, everything works out. Or if you just get off of Jordan Poole, everything works out. Or if you change the way things are done with the assistant coaches, everything's work out. Or if you change the jerseys, everything work out. I don't think it's an or thing. I think it's an and thing. I think, to your point, bringing in a coach who's known for their player development and accountability is something you need on a roster that needs to be held accountable and that needs to develop internally. So those two things play hand together. I think there was time for some changes around the organization and how they do things, around the building, around the jerseys, around all that. I think there was time for that. I think it's everything needs to be better next season, and it's not just the coaches. So I couldn't agree more with some of the stuff about bringing on the staff. I think you need to do better in that area, right? I think every area is subject to be improved, so to speak. When you have a season like you just did with a mostly healthy roster, everything needs to change. So I'm really interested to see what Jamahl Mosley has to say in his presser soon, and what's his mentality going into the situation. I'm sure he sees the similarities in the roster. I'm sure the reason why he got a 5-year deal is he's like, if this doesn't work out, I want some time to be able to turn it around. Look at the proof is in the pudding that I've been able to do it to so far, so I need a longer contract. I'm sure all those things come to play as well. But as this thing continues to unfold, the Pelicans have a new coach. They have a new situation. They have a new mantra. They have a new leader, captain of the ship. Time will tell whether that ship gets directed in the right direction or not. But what you got left for the people, Garrick, as we wrap up?
As always, you never know what people are going through, so give someone a smile a day. Listen, anytime you hire a coach, whether it's Steve Kerr, Phil Jackson, or Willie Green, it's a crapshoot, right? You never know what's going to happen. Obviously the Spurs have Greg Popovich in charge of them. They weren't good after Tim Duncan. Pop retired, and then Miss Johnson stepped in, and then they draft Wemby, and now they're in the conference finals. So sometimes it's about luck. Sometimes it's about, nailing the coach and things like that. But if anything, the Pelicans have had some really awful luck up until this, I would say this summer. They got some good luck in the draft lottery with the pick going to 8. The basketball gods decided to smile on them, unlike the Pacers, which they did not. And so maybe this is the basketball guys smiling on the Pelicans, having a new coach come in who is about as accountability driven as the Pelicans have had in a long time. So maybe this changes everything, and we'll see. So we'll be back to you with you guys after the introduction presser to talk about some of the things that Jamahl Mosley talks about. Until then, follow myself at Garrick_Rattler. Follow my brother at Raphael_Rattler. Follow the page at NO_basketball. No E. Most importantly, subscribe to NewOrleans.basketball. Appreciate everybody coming through, and we'll see you all in the next one.